Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for yet another webinar by Optmyzr. My name is Fred Vallis. I'm one of the co-founders here at Optmyzr, and I'm also the CEO, and very pleased today to be co-hosting this webinar with two people from Google. So we have Emmy and Shweta on the call today. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And I would love,
Thank you.
Great. I'd love it if you could introduce yourself so the audience knows a little bit about who you are.
Sure. So I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Weiner. I'm a platform partner lead focusing on top marketing technology companies like Optmyzr. This is the very first webinar with Optmyzr, so looking forward to connecting with everyone. Thank you.
Thanks,
Hi,
Emmy.
everyone. I'm Shweta. I'm an account manager. I am based out of Redwood City, California. I work with partners like Optmyzr and look at account level opportunities to understand what makes some of these accounts perform better versus others.
Right. So, and like Emmy said, this is the first webinar we're doing with Google. And so really exciting because this is really a chance for all of you to ask questions directly to Google, the major platform here. So for that, we have the question box that's on the right-hand side usually of your GoToWebinar. So that's going to be the best place to put in your questions. You can also use chat if there's something wrong with the audio or something like that. But we prefer getting the questions in the questions panel. That way we know which ones we haven't answered yet. So let's go to the next slide here. We'll do a quick overview of Optmyzr. Right, so Optmyzr is a software tool that's primarily focused on saving you time and making your PPC management more efficient and more effective. So we can help with anything from ad and campaign creation to optimization. And then, of course, if you're doing an amazing job in PPC, thanks to all of the tools and all the best practices you're going to learn today, you also want to report them to your clients, to your stakeholders. So we can help you with that as well. So a bit of housekeeping here on the next slide. This is being recorded, so it'll be posted live. It'll be posted on the YouTube channel, not live, but afterwards. Like I said, questions, please put them in the questions panel. If you have any follow-ups that you think are a little bit sensitive in nature and you don't want to talk to everyone on the webinar, go ahead and send us an email to support@optmyzr.com. We're happy to do a one-on-one follow-up. By the way, Google also offered to do office tours, so you'll have a chance towards the end of the webinar to indicate that you're interested in that. So that's a pretty unique opportunity. And then myself, I'll be traveling later this week to Washington, D.C. for the Advanced Search Summit, to Utah for the DMT. And then I'll be at SMX East later this year in New York. I'll be at HeroConf in London, and I'll be at PubCon in Las Vegas. So if you want to meet up with myself and my team, I'll actually be in Los Angeles as well at the B2B Marketing Expo. But anyway, that's enough housekeeping. We got a ton of content here. So let's take a look at that agenda that we've got for you today. So first of all, Google, and specifically Shweta, is going to talk about overview and best practices for making responsive search ads work really, really well. And then we're going to talk about attribution models and what's the right attribution model to set yourself up for success with PPC. And then, of course, all of this ties back to Optmyzr. So Shweta is going to give you the best practices from Google's perspective. I'm going to give you a quick overview of how you can use Optmyzr to put these best practices into play and really do it at scale and do it more effectively and efficiently. And then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. So with that, Shweta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fred. So everyone, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to be talking about responsive search ads first. So I'm not sure how many of you are actually aware 75% of advertising impact is determined by creative quality. I mean, it's natural, right? If you think about it, it's the first thing that an advertiser puts in front of a user, and the user many times actually thinks of the product and service based on how well the ad creative is. So it's super important to have the right kind of creative. What if you could automatically adapt to show the right kind of message to the right user? Well, it's not always easy because you have static ad text that you've created. The expanded text ads that a lot of advertisers are used to, it doesn't automatically change to adapt to what a user is looking for. And that's the reason we've now come up with responsive search ads. So Google's responsive search ads leverages machine learning capabilities. And so it's learning real time to understand what the user is looking for, the user's query, and then using some of the assets that you've provided, it creates more impactful ad creatives, which drive great performance. So I'm going to pause here quickly, and we have a quick survey for you.
Yeah, and so the survey should now be visible to everyone. And so who's using responsive search ads now? They've been out for quite a while, so hopefully a lot of people are using these, and we'll have some good best practices for you. But also curious if anyone hasn't tried them yet, or maybe did try them and didn't work out quite the way they were expecting. So we'll let people answer here for a couple more seconds, but I think most people have answered, and let me show you the results. So good news, most people using responsive search ads today, but that 17% right there who tried it but no longer using it. Really interesting. We'll be really interested to actually hear from you what may not have worked in the past, and if this webinar actually helps you to make the most of that. So thanks for answering these questions.
Great. Looks like a lot of you are using Google's responsive search ads. So I'm going to focus a lot of today's content on some of the best practices because some of the content might seem redundant to you. So let's make the most of today's time and ensure that it's as helpful as possible. So quickly, for those of you who haven't used responsive search ads are an ad type where you have ad text which is occupying more real estate within Google search. And by that, I mean you have more space to write your headlines and more space for the description lines. And so when you want to advertise, there is more space for you to add descriptions about the product or service, talk about a certain brand, ensure that all the details that you've always wanted to put are out there. So how does this work? This is for those of you who've never tried it. So when you create responsive search ads, you supply up to 15 headlines and 4 description lines, and these are called assets. And then what it does is machine learning then learns which combinations perform best and serves the right ad based on the user query. For instance, look at this query, eco-friendly kids fashion. It's a single query, but there can be multiple permutations and combinations. And through machine learning, depending on the kind of user, any of these 3 ads might show up. Think about a static ad like expanded text ads, you wouldn't have had that ability to make those changes or even continue to edit and reiterate those creatives multiple times a day. This is a quick and easy way, and machine learning helps you drive great performance. So what's in it for you? Responsive search ads, what it does is, as I mentioned, it occupies more space, which means that one, it's great for you, might not be as great for your competitors, especially on your mobile devices. Second thing is there is more space for you to add some of those USPs. For instance, in this case, we're talking about eco-friendly fashion and then free international shipping. In the past, you would have had to do away with certain USPs because there wasn't enough space. Now there is ample space and you can include all the different things about your product possible. A best practice that we recommend is in an ad group, we recommend that you have 2 expanded text ads and 1 responsive search ad. The next thing is always the assets that you provide determines the responsive search ad, which means ensure that you provide 5 distinct headlines and there is as little repetition as possible. In fact, eliminate repetition if possible. And also in your description lines, try to include as many attributes about your product or brand as possible. So each of the ad text each of the responsive search ads that is eventually created is distinct, unique, and helps the user find your product or service. Finally, I'm going to move on to a cheat sheet, which tells you what are some of the things that actually are helpful in a responsive search ad. Ensure that you have things like your headlines. If your headlines include keywords or your product or service, call to action, some of these things are great. Remember that a user, when they're looking for something, their attention span is so limited, so you want things to pop out at them. And so ensure that your headlines have the most important details about your brand, product, or service. And here on your screen, you can actually see some examples of things that work really well for responsive search ads. Here's more. If there's a brand,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead, Fred.
For a second, this question is relevant, I think, to the slides you're on, but Sam is asking, expanded text ads have the option to show the third headline. Do responsive search ads always show the third headline?
Yes, with expanded text ads, while it's an option, responsive search ads will always show the third headline. It's the USP of a responsive search ad that it's able to use these permutations and combinations and show all of this. So yes, that is clearly an advantage.
Great, thank you. We have a couple other questions about performance and measurement, but we'll save those for a couple of slides from now.
Yeah, that's great, because we will be talking about reporting and measurement later. And if our slides don't cover it, let's make sure to answer those questions. Thank you, Fred. So let's look at an example of a responsive search ad, and let's all think why a responsive search, this specific responsive search ad is not great. So let's pause. If you look at this responsive search ad, you can see that they're trying to promote kids' shoes. And you can know that because it's mentioned 3 different times just within the headline and a couple of times in the description line. This ad text could have been written much better. Considering this is a responsive search ad and this is the best that we could get through machine learning, you know the kind of assets that would have been provided. How do we fix this? To fix this, it's important that we remove some of those redundant elements and include other attributes. For example, eco-friendly fashion, international shipping. These are eye-catching, and a lot of people will look to these kind of products and services, and it's important to highlight that in your headline. Another thing, for those of you who haven't tried responsive search ads, one element is you have an option to pin a certain headline. By that, what I mean is, if you add about 5, you actually share about 5 different headlines, and then if you say that you want a certain headline to appear in all your ad text, then you can pin it and say that you want that headline to appear in that exact position. So no matter what combination machine learning uses, it will always ensure that a certain headline appears on top. This is important for advertisers who need to add a certain disclaimer, or let's say advertisers who want to who are promoting a brand and they want that brand to be prominently displayed in the first headline. It's great for those purposes. And one thing to note is you can actually pin more than one headline. You can actually pin multiple fields. But keep in mind that if you try to use this too many times, you are reducing the ability for machine learning to try different combinations. So be careful when you're trying this. Try to minimize this to 1 if possible. And if you're trying this for multiple headlines, try to monitor performance to see how it's working.
And Shivana, a question here from Charlie. So he's asking if there's any advice around pinning headline 1 and potentially using that headline 1 to also mimic the search term.
Yes, that can be a possibility, but think about all the different kinds of queries that are coming in. Are you certain that a user will search for your product or service using that exact query or in some form of that query? If so, you can try it, but we recommend it only when we are absolutely sure. So with responsive search ads, it's a little hard. I know all of us do not want to lose that control and let a machine do everything because you feel that we know better, but you need to allow the system a little to learn. Let's say what I would recommend is perhaps unpin it first, let it run for a while and see the different kind of combinations that come up. If you feel like the responsive search ad is not doing a great job, you're not seeing the right kind of combinations, then perhaps try pinning it. That might be a good idea. Any other questions at this point, Fred?
There's a few more, but let's continue on and I'll interject a little bit later. Thanks for that.
Okay, sure. Okay, so the other advantage of responsive search ads is when you provide those assets of headlines and description lines, you immediately understand what kind of strength that particular ad might have. This can range from poor, which means that your ad might not lead to the right kind of impressions and clicks, to good and higher than that. we always want to aim at good or higher. And when you see a recommendation that says that ad strength is poor, what we would want is try to look at your assets again and see what else you could include. Perhaps go through the website and look at some of those features which make your product or service unique from others. And if there are redundant things like, let's say, customer service 24/7 or something like that, and if you feel it's working well, great. If you feel like some of those things are not as useful, remove that and try to include something else. Always, you can look at the cheat sheet that I'd shown earlier. Some of those things actually work really well. Now, one of the important things is when you create these responsive search ads, what is the kind of reporting that is available? For responsive search ads, we have 3 levels of ad reporting available. There is ad level reporting, asset reporting, and combination reporting. Let's look at all the 3 of them quickly. You have ad level reporting, where it's an aggregate reporting that looks at all ad combinations that were shown using the headlines and descriptions that you provided. So it's more of an aggregate level reporting that's available. The next one is reporting on each individual headline and description. What it does is it looks at each of the assets that you've provided and it only showcases the impressions. Currently, this is the only metric we have available. We might start showcasing more metrics a little later on, but currently I haven't seen more details around a product roadmap to include more metrics. When we have more details, we will make sure to share that on our help center. Then we have a report that shows all your ad combinations. This is a great place for you to understand what are some of those headlines from the assets that you've provided, which are showing up more prominently. And that is a good way for you to understand that these headlines are great. These are driving better performance. When you start noticing from this report, that is the individual helpline report, where you start noticing some of the headlines have fewer impressions or very low impressions, try to swap it out with another headline. I'm going to pause here. And Fred, do we have any questions at this point?
Yeah, lots of questions around these metrics. And so why is it that we just have impressions available? And I think you kind of talked about that, but people are very curious about ROAS, conversions, CPA, all of that being added.
Okay. We have, I mean, if you're talking about the columns, as I mentioned, currently I do not see it on the product roadmap. We are still in stages where a lot of people are adopting responsive search ads and trying these on. When we start getting more and more results, we'll start adding more columns. So internally, we are driving a lot of tests to see what columns are more valuable. I know conversions are on everyone's mind, and as soon as that is available, we will include that in your help center, and it will also start showing up as a column.
Right, and Optmyzr is asking for that as well. Of course, we would love to see that metric. Yeah. So it's good that we're all asking for the same thing, and we can only hope that Google delivers it the quicker the better.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
There's also a more general question about RSAs and the machine learning. So what's generally the waiting period that somebody should, or what's the approach as far as waiting for data to come in? Like, and how do you not kill it off too quickly if you're maybe not seeing the results you wanted?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about some of it a little more in detail, but just to answer the question around learning period, I would say between 7 to 10 days, you should start seeing a great ramp up and start seeing impressions, clicks, CTR, all of it rolling in by that period. And I'll make sure to answer questions around when to pause it or whatever as we move a little ahead. So this is the right slide, right when the question came in. So how do we actually evaluate performance for responsive search ads? Just remember that why do we have responsive search ads? We have responsive search ads, so we put these ad creatives of yours in front of as many eyeballs as possible when it is relevant. So keep in mind that responsive search ads helps drive clicks, conversions, and impressions. We will not be looking at click-through rate. The other thing to remember is when you're evaluating performance for responsive search ads, you will not be doing it at the ad level. You should always look at performance at the ad group level. An ad group, as I mentioned earlier, as a best practice, we would recommend including 1 responsive search ad and 2 expanded text ads. So you have these three, and when you measure performance at the ad group level, you will actually start seeing performance upliftment rather than looking at the responsive search ad. Again, the second thing, it's just the slide is just trying to reiterate the fact that we're looking at impressions, clicks, and conversions and not at click-through rate. And point two being always evaluate performance at the ad group level. Finally, what I would like to say is for those of you who are still hesitant to try responsive search ads using drafts and experiments. And again, since we are evaluating performance at the ad group level, try to understand an ad group which has responsive search ads and compare it to an ad group that doesn't have responsive search ads. Remember to compare ad groups where you have 2 expanded text ads and 1 responsive search ad, so you can actually see great results. I'm going to pause now and understand if some of the measurement questions were answered. If we have more, I'm happy to take it now because this is our final slide for responsive search ad.
Right, I think the measurement questions, and everybody made the point they'd love to see more metrics, so we can table that one for now. We do have a couple of other RSA questions. So first, Ron is asking or saying that he sometimes notices that when he has RSAs and ETAs, the RSAs seem to take priority, even as he measures it being a lower return on ad spend. So is there something internal in the system that gives preference to RSAs, or how does the system choose between showing the ETA and the RSA?
That's a great question. So when we have a responsive search ad and expanded text ad, when the responsive search ad combination proves to be more relevant to a user query, that starts showing up more versus the expanded text ads. We definitely, initially when the ramp up period is on, we might see higher instances of responsive search ads taking priority over expanded text ads. But over time, you should start seeing that both responsive search ads and expanded text ads are shown depending on what a user is looking for and what is more relevant. Just remember that at the end of the day, what we want is ads that are most relevant to what a user is looking for, and that will always take priority.
Great. And then so there's a lot of good feedback, broad feedback. I won't take that up as questions here, but Google is getting a copy of all of these, so they will look at that. We'll also take it as product feedback for Optmyzr and help where we can. But maybe here's another question. What's the rationale specifically behind just 1 RSA and 2 ETAs?
Yeah, so we want, so I don't know if you folks remember, before responsive search ads came into being, we determined after multiple internal tests that 3 ad texts are super important for us to drive performance. And so we had 3, we tried to encourage all advertisers to try 3 expanded text ads. Once responsive search ads came into being, we still want those 2 expanded text ads. But remember, with responsive search ads, we are providing all these assets and they form a combination that shows up as 1 ad. By just having responsive search ads, you then lose complete control. If you wanted to show a certain ad text or a certain ad type, we want the system to have that ability to have some static ads and responsive search ads. Eventually, we might move away from that model, but remember that responsive search ads are also super new, just came out of beta a few months ago, and making that switch suddenly will not be great for performance.
Great. And then as far as the experiments, so I'll talk a little bit later about how you can do this experiment framework and still combine it with making RSAs in bulk Optmyzr. But then there's a related question from Ali about, I think, thresholds for impressions and clicks. And so kind of when do you have enough volume to even do an experiment versus when do you just kind of like load it up in the account and skip the experiment?
For drafts and experiments, you can actually start at the get-go. You already have an existing ad group with expanded text ads, and you want to try it with 1 responsive search ads, you can go right ahead and try it. Always remember that when you're trying something new, it will take a little more time to start seeing results because there is no historical data to analyze. Even for machine learning to learn and analyze performance, it might take longer. So while you can start from the get-go, remember you'll see quicker results when there is historical data. We do not prescribe and say it has to have 100 impressions or whatever. Just remember, higher volume equals to quicker learning. Just keep that in mind when you're running a test.
And maybe we'll do one more question here because there is a lot of questions coming in. But this is about like optimization, and should static ads include or not include the same headlines that you use in RSAs? So how mutually exclusive should the ads be for one another?
So I know very well that when you have responsive search ads and you've provided 5 headlines and you've provided multiple description lines, it can seem like the list is already exhaustive and you don't have any more. Try to experiment with your expanded text ads. It's okay. In fact, one of the things we were actually discussing, Fred and he brought it up, that it might be a great idea to, when you see certain responsive search ads, ads that are driving great results, try to use some of those headlines for your expanded text ads and see how that performs. That's always a great way.
Great.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of time as well, everyone, because we want to now go through attribution model, and we also want to hear from Fred about Optmyzr and how you can make some of these changes within the platform as well. So thank you for all your questions. I want to make sure and acknowledge that we really value the questions and feedback, especially because our product teams crave feedback, and this is one of the ways that we try to help them build their roadmap. So thank you. So jumping right into Google Ads attribution. Again, before we jump in and go deeper, we have another survey for you.
All right, so this one is about attribution models and which ones you're currently using. The primary one you're using, so you can just select one of those. And so obviously last click attribution is not the one we're going to be favoring in today's talk, but don't be embarrassed if that is the one you're using today, and help you actually make that switch if we convince you at the end of this that might be the wrong one to use. Okay, good. A decent number of people have voted, so let me close it up and show you what people use today. Nice. 12% of people using data-driven attribution, so must be relatively big accounts there. But yeah. Those are the numbers. I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, great. Looks like it's an even split. There are a lot of people still using last click attribution, and many of them have moved on, which is great. And for those of you who haven't moved on, I quickly want to say that we will be going through some implementation steps. If you guys are interested in doing this live with us and make that switch, now is as good a time as any. So you can do that with us. I'm going to pause and let you know when, but you can start readying your Google Ads account if you'd like as we're going through these slides. So user journey tends to be very fragmented, and this is not news to any of you, I'm sure. We move through different devices throughout the day, throughout the week, while we're making different kinds of searches. So we might start a search on a mobile phone, move on to your laptop, to tablet, and whatever other devices we use nowadays. So, and then similarly, the user journey also starts off many times with generic queries and then perhaps ends with a branded query. Right? So why is it important to keep that in mind as advertisers? As advertisers, it's important to remember that one, we measure the right kind of things, whether it be a visit to a website, whether it be calls, whether it be a form fill. It's important to understand what's important and measure that. Second, it's important to value and attribute clearly attribute all those touch points. This is important because if you just keep thinking about the fact that only branded terms are driving results, you miss out on a huge part of the user journey. And finally, we would want all advertisers to utilize all of these data points to drive great performance. So what is an attribution model? An attribution model is a rule or set of rules that determines how a credit is assigned to touch points along the conversion path. And just breaking this down into layman's terms, what we mean is through attribution model, you can clearly understand when a user is looking for a product and service, what are the different points along the conversion path, and are we keeping an eye out for all of those and understanding those signals? So let's take a look quickly at an example. So the first click during the purchasing process, let's say happens on a Sunday morning and starts off with a generic term that is best summer holidays. And the final conversion happens on Friday. So there are these multiple touch points in between during different times of the week. So while when the first click happened, the keyword was still, the user query was more generic, but when the final click happened, the user query was more specific. If you have last click attribution, you will constantly be focused on these terms, which are related to Paradise Bay, Bahamas in this example, and you will completely miss out on best summer holidays. So even though you have these keywords that say best summer holidays, you will not be attributing conversions to those keywords at all. You'll constantly keep thinking branded terms are driving performance and constantly focus on that, increase bids on that. In many cases, also pause some of those generic keywords. Now, here's an added complexity. There are also those middle two clicks that connected the first click to the last click. What do you do with those, and how do we work with those? So the big question being, which touch point is most important? So Google attribution model, there are multiple ones. There is last click, first click, linear, time decay, position-based, and the winner, data-driven. For those of you where some of this might be new, let me quickly talk about each of these. These graphs are actually self-explanatory, but just touching quickly on those, last click model attribution is where you are saying that the last click is most valuable to you, and you will attribute all the conversions to that one last keyword that's driving that performance. First click is just the first query. In this example, it would be best summer holidays, and you would attribute everything to that generic keyword. And then there is linear, which says that you value all of these touch points, the first, the last, and in between, and you value each of them individually equally. Finally, the last few are, and the important ones, are time decay, position-based, and data-driven. Time decay model is for people who are making a switch from last click. They value time decay the most because it's the easiest switch from last click. You are still valuing the last click the most, but you're also assigning value to all the clicks that happened before it. Then you have position-based, which works great for advertisers who have a growth mindset. Imagine you're introducing a new brand into the market, but you also want to understand how a user actually arrived at that brand. Position-based is great. So it assigns greatest value to the first and the last click, but also fractional credit to those in between. The winner, I mean it as winner because data-driven attribution model uses machine learning, and that is great. We can learn more about data-driven attribution in a couple of slides now. As I mentioned, the point of today's exercise is I'm really hoping I can convince all of you who are using last click attribution to move away from last click attribution. Just all other attributions are definitely better than last click attribution. In fact, last click and first click are the ones that we do not recommend. So as I mentioned, we would want you to move away from last click attribution. We currently have attribution modeling on Google Ads only on search. By moving away from last click attribution, you also should get more conversions on average and at a very similar cost per conversion. Let's quickly talk about data-driven attribution because this is the one that we recommend the most. However, one thing to note is with data-driven attribution, you need to have at least 600 conversions at the conversion level and at least 15,000 Google clicks in the last 30 days. And this huge amount of volume that we currently require makes it impossible for some of the smaller accounts to have this as one of the options. Data-driven attribution is great because it's making changes real time. It's learning and adjusting real time, which means that every time there is a conversion that happens, the model will work and you actually understand which are those clicks that are most valuable. So machine learning can actually do wonders and help you understand what are those touch points that you need to most focus on. Here's an example where you start off with most generic and end with the most like a branded term. And you can see that the conversion rate is 3%. This is through data-driven attribution. If there was no data-driven attribution, the advertiser would have completely missed best summer holidays, and thereby you can actually see a 1% incremental impact because you're actually attributing conversions even to best summer holidays, and you can actually see that all of these keywords are actually driving better value. So what if you do not have data-driven attribution? What do you do in that case? You then move away definitely from last click and first click, and you focus on linear, time decay, and position-based. Among these three, we do not recommend linear as much because you are blindly just assigning touch points to all the three equally, and that might not always be the case. We instead recommend time decay or position-based, and then let's learn how. When do we recommend time decay versus when do we recommend position-based? We recommend time decay for those that have a conservative growth strategy and are instead interested to understand what are those different touch points. They would still like to assign a lot of value to the last click, but they would also like to understand what are those other touch points, ranging from the first till the last click. With position-based, as I spoke about a little while ago, you have a more growth-oriented mindset. You would like to understand how the user enters upper funnel to lower funnel, what are the different touch points, how do they finally convert. And so this assigns maximum credit to first and last click and fractional credit to those touch points in between. I'm going to now pause quickly and see if people have questions. And at this point, after we answer questions, we also have a quick survey to understand how many of you would actually like to do a live walkthrough and make that change now.
Sorry, we'll go with the poll first here. I don't think people have had a lot of questions about this. I think it's pretty straightforward. Although a few questions are coming in now, but go ahead and answer that poll if you want to make the change live with us right now. And actually, so one question that came in from Ali is, do you think the attribution model choice differs by industry?
By industry, yes. Again, when you look at industries, they're all trying to drive different things. So don't think about it in terms of industry, but rather the model. What is the model? Is it lead generation? Is it e-commerce? So on and so forth. With e-commerce, for instance, we recommend time decay. But just looking back at the slide that I just showed, what is the industry trying to drive? What is the advertiser trying to drive? Is it new? Are they a new advertiser? Are they an old advertiser? Are they at a point when they're trying to grow? Are they at a time when they're just trying to measure and understand where should they invest more? So keep those questions in mind when you're thinking about attribution model. When in doubt, I would say always start with time decay, and there are ways in which you can actually check which attribution model works for you, and I'll talk about it a little bit.
Great. And then one product feedback. So will display and YouTube campaigns be getting anything besides last click soon?
I haven't heard any insights on that yet, but when we do, you guys will be the first to hear it.
All right. And some questions about cross-device, how that fits in, and then a lot of people asking for their specific verticals. So best attribution for lead gen, best attribution for B2B business. And we do have the one-on-ones with Google potentially. So we have a handful of those. So those might be great to ask in the one-on-one office hours. I'm going to close the poll here. So for full transparency, most people do want to do it later, but if you want to follow along, so we'll go like medium fast here, I think.
Yeah, and it's also pretty simple, everyone. So it's not a big deal. I will go relatively slowly, so keeping everyone's input into mind. Thank you for filling that survey. Okay, so how do we do this? You go into your account, and you click on the gear icon on the top. Oh, and while I do it, I know that you guys are still opening your account, so I'm going to go slowly. Also know that this is a super simple process, and we can definitely share resources after this if you would like to do it as well. Okay, so for those of you who have your Google Ads account open, you can open the Google Ads account, click on the gear icon, and then you can click on conversions. Then, once you click on conversions, you can actually see the different conversion actions. You might be measuring different things. You could be measuring calls, you could be measuring clicks, website visits, multiple different things. You will have to make changes to attribution across each of these. So in this case, if you want to make a change, let's say in this case, we were making a change to view another post. You click on it, and then you navigate to edit settings. And in this case, you can see under attribution model that this person for this conversion action is using last click attribution model, and we definitely want to move away from that. Once you do that, you actually see you get an option to select the attribution model. You click on last click, and you see all these options. In this case, data-driven attribution model is available for this specific advertiser. If so, we would definitely want the advertiser to use data-driven because that is best. For those of you that do not have data-driven attribution, you can use any of the other models. Remember, we do not want you to use last click or first click. Anything else is better than these two options. So you click on one of the options and you click on done, and that's it. You are done and you've made that change. And I hope at least a few of you were able to follow along and make that change. For those of you who weren't able to, I'm sure we'll share resources and you can very easily do it from your own end. Okay, Fred, were there any questions while this was happening?
Yeah, a few questions, and I'd really like to encourage people to make that change. Optmyzr, somewhat being measured on it. And really, honestly, guys, it's for the reason that last click attribution is simply the wrong model, and inertia. Make that change shouldn't be the reason you don't make the change, because it honestly is just the wrong thing to do the way that the world is becoming more and more automated. And I've written a number of blog posts on this topic on Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal. But just think about it this way, right? Like the machines, when they consider which keywords to keep bidding for, they don't have the context that all of us have. Like, is something actually relevant to my business? And when we did manual bid management, we would look at certain keywords and they would have very few conversions or even no conversions, but we'd still be smart enough to know that that keyword was actually really important at the upper funnel stages. And the machines just don't know that if you don't give it the right data, then they just think it's a horrible keyword, even if you and I would agree it's a great keyword. And that's really the point behind this, right? So really would encourage everyone who's still using last click attribution to find a way to make that change quickly, because the more you use Optmyzr, the more you use automated systems from Google, like using last click attribution is actually going to drive your results into the ground. If not today, over the coming months and years, it's just not going to work well for you. So that's why we keep harping on this. We do have a couple of questions. Yeah. So anyway, that's on my soapbox. But so question, if we want to use, so there are a couple of questions really around how does device type measurement figure into this, and how do we assign the different values in position based? And so Shweta, maybe talk a little bit about how the whole thing is by and large automated and you don't even have to think about those decisions.
Yeah. All of those decisions are actually taken out of your hand, and in a good way. You don't have to think about those things because the Google Ads system is able to determine what's more important, what is going to drive the right value and right conversions for your user, for your advertiser, and also provide the right value for the user. So you don't have to worry about some of those nuances. For those of you that have questions, as Fred mentioned, we definitely have office hours where we can jump in spur and look at your account. So definitely reach out. I just want to be mindful of time and walk through some of these misconceptions, and then I want to have then that Fred is going to go through Optmyzr. It's also important for you to understand how you can leverage Optmyzr and make some of these changes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So some of the misconceptions and concerns that we have is, I changed attribution models and my conversions dropped. What happened? This happens when people are not very clear on when to start measuring the change. Remember that if you make the change today from last click to any of the other attribution models, until yesterday it was still on last click attribution models. So there is going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. This does not in any way mean that your conversions are going away. They're just going to look different because you're going to start looking to some of those keywords that you never paid attention to before. So we recommend that you wait for about 30 days so you can clearly see a full view of the changes that have happened, and also keep in mind that there are conversion lags in mind. The sales cycle might be longer, so some of those conversions might start rolling in late. So I would say wait for 30 days and include your conversion lag to finally see the right number. For those of you that are impatient and want to see results real time, let me just quickly go back here. Instead of conversions, if you look at search attribution, click on it and you can see attribution modeling. When you click on it, you can actually compare how two different attribution models are performing. So you can use last click and the current model and see the right results. So we recommend doing that. The next one is with large amounts of conversions and longer conversion paths, you might see a decrease in conversions the day after the change. Same thing as I mentioned before, this is all because you've started to then attribute conversions to keywords from very early in the funnel. And so it'll take longer for those conversions to roll in. So it's not that the conversions have decreased, just wait for a little while for those conversions to start showing. This is only for a little while the system is getting all of these things and the reporting right. Finally, Google Ads attribution is set up so that we cannot easily update our bids multiple times a day, which is true because we do not want you to make edits multiple times a day. That's why we have smart bidding. And even before smart bidding came into existence, we wanted you to set up a bid and you monitor performance week on week and not every day. And so it shouldn't be your top thing on mind when you're thinking about making a Google Ads attribution change. Finally, sounds interesting. Can I test this on some campaigns or keywords? You cannot test it specifically on certain campaigns or keywords because the change happens at a conversion action. We just saw how to make those changes. It happens at a conversion action because you cannot just say certain keywords are impacting attribution. In fact, the whole idea of having attribution is just so you have a clearer idea of all those keywords and all those campaigns that might actually be driving those conversions. Great. Final call out, update your attribution model today. If there's one thing that you want to do in your account, I would say change your attribution model. You will definitely be thankful. I haven't heard a single negative feedback from any of the advertisers I've worked with so far who've said that they moved away from last click and regretted it. It's just a matter of understanding what you're doing and understanding how to measure. Finally, if you would like to help, if you'd like help in changing attribution models in bulk across multiple accounts, please reach out to Fred. We might be able to help you. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Fred. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Fred. Maybe I'll leave you at two, so somewhat maybe questions that may be very detailed. But so some people are saying that they heard last click pulls the conversion data faster. And maybe that goes to how you were saying, like it actually gets the conversion on the day that the conversion actually happens, as opposed to having to wait over time. Maybe that's what faster refers to here. But is there like a technical reason why conversions would be in the account faster, why the account would be updated faster? And then sort of the same question came in around Google Analytics. Like, should you use Google Analytics and can you combine that with the attribution model?
Yeah, let me answer the first question first. It's not that it's able to pull things faster. It's because you're attributing it only to one keyword. So you're able to see that conversion attributed to that keyword. And that's more recent, right? When you change your attribution model, all the other attributions go way back and they start looking at the first click and then other touch points. So as soon as you make that switch, there might be a little bit of delay for you to start seeing those conversions. If you understand how to read how the attribution works, it shouldn't be an issue. So definitely look and read up more through our help center and understand how attribution model works, and some of these questions will be easily answered. It's just a matter of being patient as soon as you make that switch. And once that happens and you wait for a few days, you'll actually start seeing conversions. You'll actually see better value. You'll start valuing more keywords. You'll start actually appreciating the entire user journey. It will help you craft better campaigns and drive better performance. Think about Google Analytics quickly. Yes, if you have GA, GA is great. It helps you look at multiple channels. It also, one of the things is you do not have to worry about reporting as much. You can actually start seeing reporting changes more immediately on GA. So if you have access to GA or if you use GA, we would recommend that. Attribution model is just a more simple way for us to drive this at an account level. So for those who want to make it at the Google Ads level, go ahead and do it on your account. If you use GA, definitely use GA.
Great. Well, so we only have a few minutes left here, but luckily Optmyzr is a pretty fast tool to help you do things in Google Ads very quickly. So let me show you a few things that relate to what Shweta was talking about today. So I've already opened up my account here. If you are advertisers, if you're not, we do have a 2-week free trial that, or users of Optmyzr, but we have a 2-week free trial you can sign up for. I have gone in here into my PPC policy and audit tool. And so this is going to help you figure out if you're using that same structure that Shweta was saying, right? So this is basically a policy framework that helps you check that structurally your account is abiding by the rules that either Google says is a best practice, or honestly the best practice that you have internally as your PPC management team, right? You don't have to do everything Google says, but you probably still have a philosophy around how you want to manage accounts, and this is going to make sure you actually keep accounts managed in that way that you want to do it. So here I've already selected a few ad group audits, and specifically I'm looking for ad groups that don't have at least 2 expanded text stats, but I'm also going to look for any that have more than 5. These are customizable numbers, of course. And I also want to make sure that we have exactly 1 responsive search ad. So this is what Google's recommending, at least 2 ETAs, at least exactly 1 responsive search ad. There's a lot of different audits. I've hidden all of the disabled ones, but I have included a few more interesting ones. So we can look for which ads are using the same headline one. So if you're being too repetitive with your ad text experimentation, we can easily check on that. We can find URLs that are still using HTTP, which is not a good thing. And we can also audit for any conversion trackers that are still last click attribution. So you can set this up, and as you can see here, I've got quite a few different templates that I'm running. So these are all different audits that I can have. And if I run it, I believe I've already pre-run it, but in this test account, I get a C grade, so it's not doing very well. And then what's nice is it tells you exactly what is at issue. Okay, so we have 6 ad groups with more than 5 expanded text ads. So I can click on that, and I'm going to see my top 5 offending ad groups. If I wanted to get the full list of all 6 in this case, or all 7 in this case, there is a download. You can download this as an Excel file. So in the Excel file, you're going to get literally 1 tab for every single thing that is an issue in your account. Okay, so here we can see that also 5 ad groups have more than 1 responsive search ad. So maybe we want to delete those. And then we can also figure out which of our conversion trackers are still on last click attribution. So this is a fantastic tool for agencies and bigger PPC teams because it just keeps you doing account management the way that you promised to your clients you would do it, right? So, and also think your client at some point is going to go and ask a different agency or a different consultant to do an audit and see if you're doing a good job. And they might be using a tool exactly like this to find holes in your strategy. So that's the audit tool. So from here, I wanted to show you the responsive search ad builder. So Shweta made a great recommendation that you use experiments to measure the before and the after and look at the ad group level. And you can use that in combination with our responsive search ad builder. So the way that would work is you go into Google Ads, you set up an experiment, but you launch it, say, tomorrow, right? So you don't launch it today, but you set it up to be launched tomorrow. And then after you've launched that experiment, or you have it held to be launched tomorrow, then you come in here now with this responsive search ad builder, which you can find in our tool right here, add responsive search ads. It asks you which campaign you want to set up with responsive search ads, and this includes experiments as well. Okay, so this is an experiment, for example. So you grab the experiment campaign. I'm going to grab a different campaign in this case. But so what it's doing now is it's pulling all of the expanded text ads, and then it's going to pre-fill all of your responsive search ads with the components from your expanded text ads. And it simply helps you with a starting point. Now, it helps you with a starting point, and so you can see here we have a couple of headlines already set up based on what expanded text ads we had. And we can go through the various ad groups that we have, and we can see each one of these has 4 headlines and 4 description lines. But what's kind of cool is you can very easily do bulk edits. If I wanted to change this, I can say modify, and I can say modified developed by an expert. Okay, I can do something like this, and then I can make that modification in multiple places. I'm going to have to shorten it here to make it fit the character limits. But now if I go to the different ad groups that we have, you can see this one. It's also made the same change because it was using the same headline. I can also do something like add a new headline, and I'm going to just put in something totally random. If I say added in all of the unapproved ads, so you now see they've all gone up to 5 headlines, and they all have that junk headline. You can also do pinning, or if you wanted to pin that to a certain position, you can choose right here which position that would be. And there you go. And so it's a very quick way to build out responsive search ads for an entire campaign. We've actually got a little YouTube video, and we can do an entire campaign in about 27 seconds, whereas in the Google interface, it would take you many, many minutes, in some cases hours, to do the same sort of thing. But from here, I would say approve all of my things that I've done in this tool, and then you can view and upload, and all of these will be live. And again, because this can either go into an experiment or a live campaign, it's up to you whether you just make this change directly or you use Shweta's methodology and you set this up as an experiment where you can actually measure the performance. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to show you is our A/B testing tool for ads now has the capacity to test responsive search ads as well. Now, we don't believe in checking an RSA versus an ETA because it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. And I have written a script if you want to do kind of like a deeper analysis of this. But if you just want to do a quick analysis, you can say, okay, I'm looking at my responsive search ads. And this, of course, is now in the case where you're running at least 2 responsive search ads in a campaign. I'm going to lower my confidence interval a little bit. I think if my account is still kind of the same as yesterday, then I should get 1 winner and loser. Unfortunately, I've gotten too much data, so that winner and loser are gone. So I'm going to try one more thing, turn on the turbo mode so that I can see all of my data. Okay, and so now this is cool because here you can see the data where it didn't meet the thresholds before. So here we have an ad group with 2 responsive search ads, the data shown right next to one another. It looks like the conversion rate of this asset is much better. So then I could make a decision, even though it's not based on statistically significant data, to go ahead and pause the selected ad in this case. And then you can see in some other cases, we do have significant data at the CTR level for different ad groups. You can also do, so once you find a winner and a loser in here, we go back to the first one, which this one seems to be kind of a winner, at least when I'm eyeballing it, you can create a similar ad. So you can click on this and it's going to load up all of your assets. And then you can make a variation of this. So if you wanted to test, say, a couple of new headlines, you could just enter them here and create that new ad and make sure you have lots of experiments running. Now, again, this is not exactly Google's recommendation to have multiple RSAs, but of course, if you decide that that's what you want to do, and some advertisers have asked us that, you will be able to do it through Optmyzr. Then that's it on RSAs. I had a couple of other things I wanted to maybe show, but we're kind of close to time here. So I'm going to see if there's any questions. And otherwise, we'll get ready here to wrap it up. So let's go back to the slides. So as far as the wrap up, we will be having this video on our YouTube channel. We'll email it out to everyone who was on the webinar today. Any follow-up questions, you can send them to support. You can meet us at a bunch of conferences. And we do have an affiliate program. So if you think Optmyzr would be helpful to people who don't subscribe yet and are your friends, send them your affiliate link and you get a 10% commission, a lifetime for getting that friend to sign up for Optmyzr. I do have one last poll that I want to launch right here. So if you've enjoyed this webinar, you want to get a little bit of follow-up, either a one-on-one demo of Optmyzr, ask your questions to my team. You can also apply for that office hour by Google. There are a limited number of those available, so not everybody's going to get that, but at least tell us if you would like one. And like Shweta was saying, we can help with changing your attribution model in bulk. So if you are an agency or you manage a lot of accounts and you don't want to go through this and spend your whole morning, just send us the list and we'll take care of it. And then if you want to get more information about becoming an affiliate for Optmyzr, you can go to that link right there that we had, or you can just ask us through this poll. So go ahead and answer those questions. And then we'll take a look at all the questions that we haven't been able to answer, but thank you so much for the high level of engagement. Thank you, Shweta and Emmy, for joining us on this webinar and offering the support from the Google end. With that, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Next webinar.